statement, I do want to point out that we'll be having probably having 6 sessions in all, and the other sessions that you'll be hearing about, the next one that's scheduled is April 12th, and it's on teaching about race and justice in 2021. And Lorenzo Boyd will be giving a presentation the day before ACJS, and so watch for that, and please put it on your calendar. The other topics we have, one of them is called Games Criminologists Play. Now you heard that right, Games Criminologists Play. Now, not to make it sound like we're getting into any type of thing that we shouldn't be talking about. In that session, what we'll be talking about is how to play games in class and how to bring gaming into your course activities. We'll also have a session on teaching about social justice and a session on teaching about policing in 2021. And then at some point, we'll have a session called a Zoom room discussion, where we actually have four folks who've agreed to be in breakouts, and we'll bring a number of you together and others that want to come and just have these round robin sort of speed dating type discussions with your colleagues. So we're excited about that. As you know, I tell my, I share often about when people ask, how did you learn to teach? I point out that no one really taught us in graduate school how to teach. And when you think back to your own graduate school experience, I'm betting that many of you didn't learn how to teach in graduate school. In fact, we get tossed into the fire and we have to figure it out. And it's taking advantage of these sorts of opportunities that help you learn how to succeed. Now, I'm very excited about Jason's topic of experiential learning. One of the things I heard a business person say to a group of students not long ago was he told the students, don't worry about your GPA. And professors, we think, oh no, don't tell a student that. But then he said, in all my years after graduating, nobody has ever once asked me what my GPA was. He said, people ask me, what did you do while you were in college? What are your skills that you can demonstrate? And you're going to hear from Jason about experiential learning and the way that we can help our students learn skills and reflect on that learning so they're able to communicate how those skills can be translated into practice. Now, we're so fortunate because Jason Ostrowe is a faculty member at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. He's an assistant professor there, and he teaches a wide range of criminal justice classes relating to policing. He's got 15 years of police officer experience and is able to use that experience as well as his training to integrate learning in the classroom. And his research interests focus on federal invention and police reform under 141, criminal justice education and training. And he was a 9/11 World Trade Center first responder and recently appointed to serve a 4-year term as a representative to the World Trade Center Health Program Scientific Technical Advisory Committee. And we definitely thank him for his service there. And we thank him for being with us today to share about experiential learning. So Jason, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen because I have a PowerPoint that I created for everybody to follow along with.
I have stopped sharing my screen now, Jason, so you should be able to pull yours up. And just group, if you have questions throughout, you can feel free to put those in the chat. I'll be monitoring that, and we can either answer those at the end, or if they're highly relevant to the conversation that's going on right now, we can interrupt Jason and ask those questions as we go along. So just if you have questions, please make sure you're putting those in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Sage and thank you to ACJS for the opportunity to present. And of course, thank you to Ken Peak for, I'm really quite honored to have received this award from ACJS and very proud of that. So thank you to all of you. So this presentation, Transforming Student Perspectives Through Experiential Learning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Jason Ostrowe, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. And as the introduction alluded to, prior to me coming into higher education, I spent 15 years as a New York City police officer, where I had the opportunity to work as a patrol officer, policy analyst, as well as police academy instructor. And we heard a little bit about teaching and how to teach. Where do you learn to teach? And where do you get that bug? I received that bug in 2006 when I was certified by the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services to teach in the police academy. And I knew at that moment that that's something that I really wanted to do. And I wanted to do everything I can to turn that into my next career. And so when the opportunity presented itself to do it full time, I said, now's the chance to do it. A tenure track position, teaching in the city that I love, the material that I love, and with the students that I love. So I'm very honored to be able to have done this, and I've been doing it now for 5 years. So this presentation. So today I'm going to discuss criminal justice program at the Borough Manhattan Community College. I'll introduce you to the school in which I work. I'll discuss course learning objectives and the rationale for the particular assignment which I created. I'll explain the theoretical underpinning for experiential learning, and then describe the experiential assignment and feedback that I received from the students. And finally, assuming we have some time at the end, we'll allow for question and answer and a breakout session. So the Borough Manhattan Community College. We are the largest college in the City University of New York system. That's what's known as CUNY. We had a 2019 enrollment of 26,506 students, and it's not really that far off from that now, even with the downturn in enrollment. Our gender breakdown is 43% male to 57% female. Our racial and ethnic composition is 41% Hispanic, 32% Black, 14% Asian, 12% white, and less than 1% American Indian. We have 168 countries represented at our school, and over 100 languages are spoken at the Borough Manhattan Community College. Criminal justice is the largest major apart from liberal arts, with 2,600 some odd approximate students in our program, and it fluctuates. We're located in the Tribeca neighborhood of Manhattan, which is in downtown. It's adjacent to the Hudson River. It is a very residential community, but at the same time, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of restaurants. It's very pretty. It's right next to the World Trade Center site, as well as the Freedom Tower. We don't have necessarily a campus proper per se, but we do have buildings, and we have a quad area that you could see right there. And it's really a pretty area for the students to walk around and just enjoy themselves. Our students come from all 5 boroughs, as well as sometimes outside of the city, whether that's the suburbs or New Jersey. But most of our students come from the 5 boroughs, and they commute in, taking typically the subway. We're next to major subway stations, the 2 and the 3. And walking around the city and being able to enjoy your education in downtown Manhattan is really quite an experience. I think not even as an instructor, professor there, but also I think as a student, because it's a really beautiful area and there's so much going on. And also, when you think about when you look at the gender and racial and ethnic background of the school itself, it really nicely represents the city in which it's situated, which of course New York City is incredibly diverse and incredibly rich in people of different backgrounds. This is a little bit of shameless self-promotion, but I have to get into it because I'm very proud of it. Our criminal justice program at the Borough Manhattan Community College was the recipient of the ACJS National Criminal Justice Month Program of the Year for 2020. There's a photo of it that I took and plopped down into the PowerPoint. I did so because I very unceremoniously received that plaque in the mail, merely for the fact that there was no conference last year. So they had no other choice, but that's the only way that they gave it to me. Our program has 9 full-time faculty members, all of which have terminal degrees, PhDs, and approximately 38 part-time adjunct professors teaching a variety of criminal justice courses. And many of our adjunct faculty are really accomplished people who work for agencies within the 5 boroughs, law firms, Vera, you name it. And so we have a very talented group. I'm very proud of our faculty. In addition, I would say, even though Borough Manhattan Community College is a community college, I point out that everybody has a PhD among the full-timers because we still have a research and scholarly requirement. And I know many community colleges don't have that. Many community colleges, maybe their faculty members, they have to have a master's degree or credits above master's, or maybe some of them do have PhDs or law degrees, but BMCC has a scholarly and research requirement. So if you're on tenure track, and I think that's important. So, at our school, they do take research seriously, although teaching is the primary function in which you do, what faculty members do. We're also part of what's called the CUNY Justice Academy. We have a transition agreement with John Jay College, What that means is that students who are at our school and they complete the program with 60 college credits at a minimum of 2.0, they transition to John Jay College of Criminal Justice automatically if they choose to go there. And it really provides a really great opportunity for students to continue their education in criminal justice at a very reputable criminal justice college, which has bachelor's degrees are awarded, master's degrees, as well as PhDs, in a school that many students wouldn't have the opportunity to attend otherwise. So it's really a great opportunity for our students. As well, we have transition agreements with other articulation agreements with other colleges, excuse me. We also offer a open educational resource, zero textbook cost program in the criminal justice program, meaning that students can elect to take courses in which there is no textbook cost whatsoever. All the materials are provided to them through open educational resources. Each of the faculty members was tasked with developing course hubs using open educational resources. And I was the one that was tasked with creating the policing open educational resource. And so students, save tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in textbook costs because of this. And so I'm very proud of that as well. So we try and be at the cutting edge vanguard of what's going on in criminal justice. And I think that, I have to point out that, many of my colleagues are responsible for these such things as the OER program as well as the award. Our criminal justice program, we have a few core courses like Introduction to Criminal Justice, Criminology. Those are both 100 level courses. And then there's the 200 level courses, including Constitutional Law, Policing, Corrections, and then Crime and Justice in the Urban Community. You can think of Crime and Justice in the Urban Community as sort of the capstone course of all of the core courses. The other ones all are at 200 level. The program requirements at criminal justice also require students to take Intro to Sociology, American Government, and then Stats. And then, of course, there are college requirements, including, 2 sections of English, 2 sections of Science, 2 sections of Modern Languages, 2 sections of History, and then Humanities, and then other liberal arts courses to round out their education. So when we think about policing class, and I've taught constitutional law, Introduction to Criminal Justice, as well as criminology, but policing is sort of my bread and butter, not necessarily because of my area of study, but really it's a combination of both my practitioner background as well as my sort of academic interest. And as somebody who is, quote unquote, the policing guy at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, what I really try and do is I try and think about taking ownership of the course a little bit. But when I got there, the program had certain requirements, as well as each course had certain requirements. So the course objectives for policing class are these 3. The first one is to give students an understanding of the history, structure, and culture of American police agencies. And professors have their own way about doing that and achieving that objective. They do it typically through lecture, through demonstration, discussion, videos, writing assignments, instructor-centered as well as student-centered activity, and I do as well. The second objective is to gain an understanding of the diverse roles and responsibilities of American police. As well, instructor-centered, student-centered activities, maybe some flipped classroom, maybe some special readings, special videos, maybe have a guest speaker come in. All of those are ways in which faculty members, including myself, try and meet that objective. But the last one is something that really intrigued me, and I thought long and hard about how I can really do this to enable students to recognize and differentiate between the assumptions and realities of contemporary issues facing police departments in America today. That is quite a mouthful. But again, when I was hired 5 years ago, these were the objectives, and we've stuck with them since then. And I really thought long and hard about how do I do that? And I think that this appeals to my sort of practitioner and pragmatic side, along with my academic side. And so as sort of, quote unquote, again, the policing guy at the Borough of Manhattan Community College, I sort of tried to take ownership and leadership, especially with this one, because I think that this is really important, especially in today's day and age, when policing and criminal justice issues are such hot button topics, and people want to talk about them, come up with solutions. Another thing that I want to point out about not just policing class, but all the courses at BMCC in the criminal justice program, although we have a standard syllabi, the faculty members have total academic freedom in how they want to achieve those outcomes, which is really important because this allows students to sign up for the course with me or somebody else. With me, they may get a more practical, pragmatic experience, whereas with somebody else, they may get more of, let's say, critical criminology perspective, social activism perspective, or maybe some other type of sociological perspective, and that's okay. And that's what's great about having a large program. So the way in which I start my classes off generally at the beginning of the semester is I want to get students talking, and I want them to open up a little bit. And I try and ask them, hey, let's talk a little bit about terms associated with police. When I say police, what do you think of? And as you all know, students are reluctant to raise their hand often. They're reluctant to speak out. They're reluctant to say anything on the computer or on Zoom. What I asked them to do, and this is going back pre-coronavirus, was in class, I would ask them, what are some things you think about when you hear the term police, policing, police officers? And often they're reluctant to say anything. And often also, maybe the most vocal people are the only ones to speak. So what I asked them to do is say, hey, you just take out a piece of paper, don't put your name on it. And I don't care what you write. I don't care what you write. I'm not going to be offended. Many times students are a little reluctant to disclose things to me, especially at the beginning, because like, oh, he was a police officer. He might be offended by what I think or what I feel. No, I'm not going to be offended by what you think or what you feel. I'm going to be enlightened when I hear about what you think and what you feel. So I asked them to write down, what do you think about the police? What do you think about policing? What do you think about police officers? Use those different terms. Write it down. Don't put your name on it. And then I'll often get things like positive terms like protection, service, serve the public, arrest offenders, integrity, and helpful. I also often get neutral terms such as Law and Order, the TV show, right? SVU, CSI, the TV shows, investigation, investigate, detective, discretion, authority, sort of these neutral terms associated with police. But what I get the most is the negative terms. I get terms such as abuse of power, power trip. I get terms such as shootings and killings, misconduct, corruption, systemic racism, harassment, stop, question, and frisk. Although stop, question, and frisk, those terms have really tailed off in the last few years, at least in New York City, in terms of it being such a hot issue. I get terms such as attitude problem, unfriendly, and I think they think that they're better than everybody else. So I look at these terms and I say to myself, okay, well, who's right and who's wrong? And the answer is everybody and all the above, because they're perceptions, and perceptions are okay. But what I am more interested about is not necessarily changing what you think, but maybe I can have you perceive things from a different point of view. Maybe what you think, whether that's positive or negative or neutral, is based off of assumptions instead of realities. And so I want to do whatever I can to bridge the gap between those assumptions and realities. So how do I go about doing that? And I thought long and hard about how I could go and accomplish this. What are the best ways to attack that third outcome, that third objective, differentiating between assumptions and realities and contemporary issues in American policing today. I thought about different teaching methods that I had learned over the years and different theories that I had learned over the years. I went back to Bloom's taxonomy and the knowledge comprehension application. And then I moved into other areas of service learning I looked into, and then I looked into experiential learning. And I thought that experiential learning had such a rich history when it comes to criminal justice. It really goes back quite a way. And as I looked into experiential learning, Kolbe's learning theory, it seemed to just really make sense. And I thought a lot about my own experience as an undergraduate back in the 1990s. The thing that I remember most, was most meaningful to me as a criminal justice student, was when I did an internship with a county probation office my senior year. And it was really enlightening and transformative. I remember going in, not knowing what to expect, and I remember leaving thinking, wow, this was really an amazing experience. It was a combination of sort of social work combined with law enforcement and investigations. And I left there thinking, this is something I could see myself doing. I didn't end up becoming a probation officer, but nonetheless, it's one of the things that I remember most about my entire undergraduate education. And so I thought back about experience-based learning, experiential learning. I looked at Kolbe's learning theory. And so, since there was such a rich history there in terms of criminal justice, I said, seems like it would work. Kolbe's definition of experiential learning is the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience, resulting from combination of grasping and transforming experience, which is a little bit academic-y, right? But I think in sum and substance, it really makes a lot of sense. Learn by doing, learn by experience, learn by reflective observation, learn by putting all these things together. So Kolbe looks at that as a combination of grasping experience and transforming experience, concrete experience, abstract conceptualization, as well as active experimentation and reflective observation. The image over there to your right is a figure that I pulled that was one of the few images that were not copyrighted that I could use for common use. So I have seen better ones, but this one I thought was good enough. So when we think about this as sort of a cycle, I don't think of it as a cycle so much, but I think of it as a continuum. And I think that in many of the visualizations of Kolbe's learning theory, you see it as a continuum between concrete and abstract, as well as active and reflective. And so this is what I wanted to get the students to do. I wanted them to do, to review, to conclude, and to think about what they learned, all right, and to express that to me. And also I'm thinking with the objective of merging the differences between assumptions and realities, and maybe getting students to see things from a little bit of a different perspective. So what I asked them to do was to learn about and experience police-community relations in the area in which they live. And the impetus for this was really because in conversations in class, often students would say things to me about police in class. And this is not everybody. This is some students who would say things sometimes. And typically it was the most vocal students. I would hear things such as, lesson would be on maybe police community relations or diversity in policing or whatever the topic would be. And I would hear comments such as, well, in my community, the police have nothing better to do than to harass us. In my community, no one trusts the police. In my community, everybody hates the police. You know, professor, why do the police have to do X, Y, Z? I don't understand that. Or the police should be arresting real criminals instead of being petty, right? And these are, you know, these are provocative statements. These are loaded statements. And I never disagree with their statement. I always focus on the assumptions. I never judge the content of what they're saying. I don't need to get into it. Well, you don't really understand because, you know, if you were a police officer, they don't need to hear that from me. I don't need to say that. What I need to do is I need to address the assumptions of what it is they're thinking and try and have them see their assumptions. Well, maybe if I look at things from a different point of view or a different perspective, maybe it'll change my mind, or maybe I see things, you know, a little bit differently. So again, I focus on assumptions and I don't judge the content of what they say because their perceptions are very real and they're very true to them. And I'm not going to deny them that. So I asked them to attend a police community council meeting in their precinct of residence. And what I mean by that is I asked them to go to a community council meeting where they live. In New York City, there are 77 precincts and PSAs, and not including PSAs. PSAs are what are known as police service areas. In New York City, police service areas are NYPD precincts that police public housing developments, excuse me. So within the 5 boroughs, within these 77 precincts and PSAs, there are monthly meetings, and these are attended by the community council, which are members of the community, including precinct level leadership are always there. Sometimes they're frequented by assistant district attorneys, city council, and other elected officials. And then sometimes there are other public administration officials there, including child welfare, school safety, any number of sanitation, any number of other members of the public administration will attend these as well. Again, they're held in each of the 77 precincts and PSAs throughout the 5 boroughs. I require students to do some background research on conditions in their precinct using CompStat 2.0. And I think that this is a very valuable thing because it introduces them to crime statistics and you know, how to do research on, you know, their own community. Again, I want students to think about, okay, what is really going on in my community? You know, what are some of the conditions? What are some of the crime conditions, the reported conditions? And so I have them do that. I demonstrate it in class and I show them, and they're really like, wow, this is really interesting. You know, I never knew that this existed. So I have them do that, a little bit of research on their own. And then I ask them to go to their resident precinct so they can understand and appreciate the community conditions within their own community. One of the things that I want them to recognize very quickly is that although they have an opinion, and their opinion is not necessarily a wrong one about what goes on in the community, they don't really know enough people or enough about their community in all likelihood to really understand what's happening in their community. So by going to these, it really, you know, hopefully sheds some light on what is happening in their community. The assignment is really this: attend a police community council meeting in your precinct of occurrence and address the following 5 prompts. I asked them, which did you attend? What was the date, time, location? How many police officers were there? How many members of the public were there? I asked them to listen and describe 3 community issues that were discussed. What solutions to those complaints did the police offer? And how would you describe the tone of the meeting? How would you characterize the relationship between the community and the police where you live? And then what did you learn? And did anything surprise you? Okay, and I'm just going to go over these one by one and explain the rationale behind each and every single one of them. So the first one is, which did you attend? What was the date, time, and location? How many police officers were there? How many members of the public? I think in a way this helps to verify that they actually went. I asked them to include a picture, and I say that you won't get credit for it unless you do that. Okay, and it helps verify attendance. It sort of forces them to be active in their own education. It forces them to talk to somebody. It forces them to look around. When they show up at these events and the police see somebody looking around, the police will approach them, not in a enforcement way, but in sort of a service way. And often I get questions, Professor, I don't know which one to attend. I don't know which one to go to. I don't know my precinct of residence. Where do I find out this information? I get, the questions come flying at me. And the reality is this: I've always been an educator who, and this sounds a little bit like a pejorative, but I don't mean it to be. But I've always been an educator who does not necessarily believe in hand-holding. And so I make it my business to ensure that the students are active in their own education. And I say, okay, this is part of your assignment. You have to find out your precinct of residence. You have to find out when it's being held. You have to verify that it's actually going on. You have to find out where to go. You have to find out the location. It's part of your assignment. That's for you to do, not for me to do. Because if I do it, that's taking the burden off of them. And it's taking the experience of being active in their education and in their community away from them. So I say, that's your responsibility. It's part of your assignment. I believe you can do it. Go do it, So this is why I number one is the way that it is. Number 2 and 3, I address together, and I asked them to listen, describe 3 community issues discussed, and then what solutions to those complaints did the police offer. And I think this promotes community engagement. It promotes an understanding of community concerns, because maybe those of you who have taught policing have experienced this as well, but I can have conversations in class with the students, and it quickly devolves into, storytelling. Well, this happened here, and my friend, this happened too, and why did that happen, and why did my response to that is often, all right, if you really want to understand police behavior, we have to kind of look at things from a different point of view. A student may say, well, I saw a bunch of cops, chasing the kids off the block. Why are they always harassing kids? The kids aren't doing anything. And that is the student's perception, and that perception is the student's. But what I hope that this does, is now when the student sees what's going on in their community, and they say, well, the reason that's going on maybe is because X, Y, Z, instead of what I thought before. So I'm looking at things from a different point of view. And then, of course, number 4, how would I describe, or how would you describe the tone of the meeting? How would you characterize the relationship between the community and the police? I think this is part of the reflective part of Kolbe's learning theory, thinking about what did I see, what did I experience, what was the relationship like? And then last but not least, the most simple questions out there, but I think that they provide really the most robust answers, and I'll go through them in just a second. What did you learn? Did anything surprise you? And I think that this, what I've seen with this is really indicative of Kolbe's idea of experiential learning, and I'm looking forward to going over that with you. Okay, so this went on during spring 2019 and fall 2019. I assigned it as extra credit because it wasn't built into my course prior to the course running. So I couldn't hold students responsible for going out into the street, going out to the field and doing this kind of experiential work without letting them know that it was part of the course beforehand. So I offered them 10% extra credit towards their overall grade. I had 101 students participate, which was really fantastic. Again, this was over the calendar year 2019-2020. I'm sorry, calendar year 2019, spring 2019 and fall 2019. They visited 44 precincts within the 5 boroughs and then 1 in New Jersey. The top precincts that were visited were the 2-8 and the 5-0, the 83rd and the 77th precinct. Just a little note about those. The 2-8 is in Uptown Manhattan. The 5-0 is in the Bronx. The 83rd and the 77th are both in what they call Brooklyn North. And what I'll comment about those precincts is that those precincts, they are among the more active police precincts in New York City. They're very residential. They have a combination of apartment complexes, public housing, attached homes, schools, parks, you name it, right? Factories, everything. And they're busy. They're very busy places. They tend to be places where crime is a little bit higher than other parts of the city. and activity is a little bit higher than other parts of the city. But this is where the students live. This is where they come from when they attend BMCC. So it makes a lot of sense. 5 students did not report their location. And if you look at the figure to the right, what you'll see is I have a comparison between borough. In New York City, we call boroughs, counties boroughs. They're the same thing. But in New York City, over to your right, you could look at this figure and you could see that 29% of the students that attended these meetings went to community council meetings in Brooklyn. 29% of the BMCC population resides in Brooklyn. 21% of the attendees went to Bronx precincts. 19% of BMCC students live in the Bronx. So it makes a lot of sense what you're seeing there. The one discrepancy there, other than not reported, is in Manhattan. So in Manhattan, you see 22% of the attendees went to Manhattan precincts, but just 17% of BMCC students reside in Manhattan. And so the discrepancy there was because I had a few students who contacted me via email or even after class and said, Professor, I really want to go. The problem is that I don't want to walk into a police precinct, or I'm afraid to be seen by with the police in my community, in my neighborhood. I don't want people seeing me around the police. And there's a fear there, not a fear of the police per se, but a fear of what others might think of them. So my answer to that was, of course, no problem at all. So you can go to one down the block. I also had a couple of students, not that many, but I had a few students who said to me, Professor, I work after school and I'm not going to have the opportunity to go. I have to work, and then by the time I get off, I'm not going to be able to make it. So can I go to the one here? And my answer, of course, was no problem. I mean, it does defy the underlying rationale, but at the same time, I have to balance that against safety concerns of the students, as well as some students. It's just I want them to go. I'd rather them go than not go. And if it means, the job or not go, then I want them to go. So I'll make that accommodation. Okay. So the reflections on relationship and tone, this was the 4th task, the 4th prompt that I asked of them. And this was really, again, intended to serve as a counterpoint to preconceived ideas of police-community relations. And I did a basic thematic analysis from their responses. And the first theme that emerged from this was this idea of welcoming and comfort. So I highlighted some of the main points in that. And these are the students' words verbatim. Students said the tone of the meeting was uplifting and welcoming. It was great. The community members felt welcomed and felt comfortable. As soon as I walked in, officers came up and introduced themselves, gave me cards and flyers. And you might be saying to yourself, well, of course, police were on their best behavior. I agree with you to a certain extent. This is a police community event, and you would expect the police to be on their best behavior. However, it doesn't change the students' perception of things. And moreover, the students, many of them are savvy enough to know this, and they've made mention of this in their when they handed in these assignments. They talked about exactly that. I've never seen police interact with the community like that, or the cops have never been so friendly. So they were savvy enough to understand that, incorporate that into some of their responses. And more along these lines, welcoming comfort, very joyful. They support the community very well. They made me feel very welcome. I like this second bullet point. The sergeant from the police department personally introduced himself to my mom and I, along with everyone else. I like that for a lot of reasons, but one of them, of course, is, excuse me one second, is that this student had their mother come along with them. I think that's great. Greater community involvement, being active in your child's education, being active, the child being active in their parents' own education. I think it's great. The second theme that emerged from this was this idea of surprise, right? Students said, I was totally surprised how much the community and the police officers interact with each other. The meeting actually showed a very united community. Again, that's, surprised by the relationship. The third bullet point I think is great too. It opened my eyes a lot on what's happening within my community. And that's one of the things I really wanted to get to. I want you to see what's actually happening in your community. Let's not just assume that you know everything that's happening in your neighborhood. Let's find out. Let's find out a little more. Okay. So also along this idea of surprise was I was surprised to see the relationship between the police and the community members. It was surprisingly positive. They treat each other like family. And this third bullet point I think is great. This is coming from, again, an 18, 19, 20-year-old. Although I thought that the police and the community do not have a nice relationship at all, I was wrong. How often do you hear somebody, a 19-year-old say that? I was wrong. And then the third theme that emerged from this 4th question was this idea of respect and trust. The student said respectful and caring, friendly and respectful, trust them and to solve it. And it's not something that you hear about from college-age students talking about their relationship with the police, especially in big urban communities like New York. Right? You don't hear that at all. You don't hear it publicly, but you hear it in class, I guess. And also, I would describe the tone of the meeting as very respectful. They hold a healthy relationship. They talk to each other with humor and respect. And then the third bullet point, the members looked like they trusted the police and wanted to know more about what they were doing to help. So again, this is mutually beneficial relationship that they're seeing. Looking at the second and the third bullet point, the second and third prompt, prompts number 2 and 3 of the assignment. Again, I asked them what did the community bring up as issues? What are the 3 things that you heard? What were the 3 solutions? Because I want students to understand that maybe when they see something happening in their neighborhood, maybe when they walk by and they see a bunch of kids in the park hanging out and the cops are like, whatever, quote unquote, hassling them, giving them a hard time, maybe there's more to the story than what they perceive. So I said, what are some of the complaints that you hear about in the community? And the students wrote, in some instances with them, they heard complaints about noise. Community would talk about motorcycles, horns, neighbors, exhaust, just noise. Examples like, hey, one person complained that they like to go to bed at 9 o'clock and they live next to the park, but they can't go to bed at 9 o'clock because, the kids are always in the park, they're making noise, they do what kids do, and he doesn't want to go out there and address it with the kids. So what does he do? He doesn't necessarily want to call the police. And so I think that's good to have students hear this because it allows them to see things or hear things from a different point of view. Complaints also revolved around drug and alcohol activity in the neighborhood. Many community members remarked about not having enough police visibility, just not having enough police out in the streets. Homeless conditions, crowds, particularly as they relate to schools, like 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the school's let out and there's a lot of kids on the street, especially in New York. You see them, they all come out the subways, they come out the buses, they're all over the place. And so that was another complaint. Bike riding on the sidewalk, and then of course you heard this one, which is newer problem, which is stolen property, deliveries being stolen from the front of people's stoops and apartments and things like that. So the solutions that many of the police offered were, and the students remarked, the police would say, call 911 if you have a problem, call 311 if it's a non-emergency. 311 is New York City's non-emergency line, so it's like noise complaints, things of that nature. Solutions also involve community police officers. They would say that the police, the commanding officer of the police department said, okay, that's Officer Jones's beat. Officer Jones is here right now. Officer Jones, give these people your phone number. You can call Officer Jones and he will deal with that directly. He'll help you out. So this idea of community policing they saw. Police also talked about having greater presence, taking more enforcement if necessary. And then of course, we'll refer some problems to other agencies as necessary. These are all, good solutions, but they're all obviously kind of inside the box, right? At the same time, when it comes to police responses. But again, I wanted to see students hear what their community members, their neighbors had to say about issues in their community. And I wanted them to hear what the police were offering and then the community members and neighbors' reaction to that. Okay, so moving on to the fifth prompt in this assignment. And this was really intended to actualize their experiential learning. Very simple questions. What did you learn? What did you learn that was new? And then what I took away from this was this idea that many students talked about community involvement. I didn't know that we as a community had a voice, right? It gives them an opportunity to discuss what's happening in their neighborhood. Second bullet point, my sister and I will most likely go back to some monthly meetings. It was a great experience. I might start going to more of these meetings. I learned a lot about policing and how it's conducted in my own community. And this is what I wanted them to achieve. More community involvement. I'm going to attend more of these meetings in the future. Second bullet point, I'll try to make a routine of mine to attend these meetings and update on what's happening. And then the third bullet point I think is also great, right? Hopefully I can gather some neighborhood friends to come to these meetings and offer their advice to the police, which is what you want. You want communication between the community and the police, and you really want that from younger people as well. And then there's also this idea of understanding that came from this. I learned a lot about what's happening in my community that I never knew about, right? And then second bullet point, I learned that a big part of the community still has trust in the police. And the third bullet point I think is fantastic, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second. What I did realize was the elderly see problems within the community differently than the youth living within the community, which is like a bit of a eureka, it's a bit of a eureka moment. And that's really what I want them to get. That's really what I want them to understand when they leave this assignment, is that the world could be a big place, community could be a big place, and not everybody's going to see things exactly the way that you do. And next time you see the police doing something, it's possible, maybe it's probable, that maybe you'll think and say, I know why the police are, chasing those kids off the corner. It's because last week everybody was complaining about the kids on the corner, and that they couldn't, make it across the street, they couldn't drive down the block, and so on and so forth. And the third point of this was the third theme that emerged from this was this idea of really transformation. And I really liked this, and I thought it was very meaningful and important. I honestly thought community policing was a textbook phrase until I attended this meeting. I mean, this is like, forget the book, forget the material. This student learned more by doing in one day than any chapter I think could have given them. I learned a lot about the community that was not as against the police officers and what they do as I thought. Again, so it's like maybe some of those really provocative statements, maybe they are seeing their own assumption and addressing their own assumption by doing this in some of those earlier provocative statements. It really benefited my career, my academic network, which is great. I like these last three also. I think that they're really meaningful. As I got older, my opinion of the police shifted to fear. So instead of like becoming more supportive of the police, they became more afraid of the police because of what they heard without fully understanding the role, right? And then these last two bullet points were written by different students, but I thought that they were very meaningful. To sum up, I am blessed to attend the 83rd Community Council. I mean, that is like, to me, that speaks of like this almost spiritual experience to go to this. And I was like, wow, that's really something. And I'm glad that it made such an impact. And then the third bullet point, towards the end of the meeting, they closed with a prayer, which to me was very nice and meaningful. I already look forward to attending the next meeting, which these are indicative of really, transformational learning experience from just something as simple as going and participating in a community meeting. So some of the general insights that I took from this particular assignment in this project is that experiential learning can really have a transformative effect on students, as indicated by their responses. And I think that greater exposure allows students to view police in their service role rather than as occupiers or enforcers, meaning they show up at this meeting and they can start to develop that relationship, and maybe they see the police in a different way. Next time the college student is walking down the street and they see Officer Jones on the corner and they say, "Hey, Officer Jones, I saw you at the meeting last week. How you doing?" And Officer Jones turns around and says, "Hey, nice to see you. What's your name again?" "Oh, Freddie. Hey, Freddie, good to see you. Listen, you have any problems, give me a call, or I'll see you at the next meeting." They see them as a service provider rather than as an occupier or enforcer. And that vibe, that change is really, what policing needs. It facilitates young people involved in their community, helps to promote a better understanding of different community perspectives. I think it allows for better understanding of and motivation for police behavior. And I think it also helps promote higher levels of learning when you think about Bloom's taxonomy, knowledge, comprehension, application, and this doing aspect of it. And then finally, many students just expressed how valuable it was for them. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. So finally, this is my last slide before questions and answers, any time for a breakout. If you think about areas of exploration, both in the scholarly aspect, research aspect, but also in terms of implementation and pragmatically, student remarks regarding the age of many attendees, they really talked about, there were so many older adults there. I was the youngest person there. Confidence in the police by age is highest among those who are 55 and older, according to Gallup, right? So does young person's exposure to police in this community context change that perception or help that perception? I think changes in student perceptions, you can look at it as part of a pre and post test. Many students attended really claimed that prior to attending, claimed they had a very antagonistic relationship with the police. And it makes sense, confidence in the police by age is lowest among college student age, 18 to 34. And then again, do changes in this environment, like exposure in this environment, change the street counter environment, which is, really what we're trying to, really important. And then also, I think it's important to try and capture individual and community demographic data for analysis. Okay. So I know I went through that. There was a lot of information, a lot of stuff there, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you may have now. If not, I know that Jessica talked about having us go into breakout rooms really quickly so you can maybe talk to each other and share ideas. I have a couple of thoughts on that if we get to that. So does anybody have any questions? Or Jessica, you want to say anything?
Well, we did have one question come through in the chat, Jason. I'm not sure if you can. And if you can read that and if you want to address that, I can read it aloud if you can't access the chat.
Okay. Okay. I'm not really sure. I have a lot of different. I have quite a bit of comments here. So is there? Do you have the question that?
Yeah. So the question was asked around how you provide students with the research and scholarship that's been conducted on historical and recent community police relations, because the research would support some of what you refer to as students' perceptions of police officers.
I missed the first part of the question. I'm sorry. If you could just go back and reread that.
Yeah, so he said he appreciates your efforts to provide students an alternative experience with the police, but do you also introduce them to the research and scholarship that's been conducted on historical and recent police community relations?
Yeah, I do talk a lot about that. I give them readings on police community, community policing, problem-oriented policing, diversity in policing. We have lessons in that. I do not at the 200 level. At the 200 level, this course is 200 level, community college level. I do not get into great depth on the academic research on this material. I keep it much more global. I keep it more largely thematic. And I would say that I do go into those issues, and I'm obviously very aware that how provocative they can be, especially in today's day and age. And so I always try and teach that material with great understanding and sensitivity of my own position as a former police officer, standing in front of a classroom, inner city community college. What I will say is that, again, I try and do things from a more global perspective. I have to be mindful that this is a 200 level class. Many students have, I would say, struggle with English. Many of them struggle with English. Many of them struggle with reading. So I got to try and go more global. I taught a 300 level elective in policing at BMCC, and I got into it in much greater detail there. I also taught an honors section of policing, and we got into much more of the academic side of things. But at the 200 level, I keep it, again, more global, a little bit more pragmatic. Yes.
Also raised the issue just around kind of the stop and frisk policy that, targeting African Americans and Latinos disproportionately, and just how some even your potential classmate, students in your class, if they're young, male, color, they've experienced that firsthand.
Yes.
And how built their perception based on their interactions with the police.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's like, I would say when I started at BMCC in 2016, and that was really a very, very big issue in New York City, even in 2016. I think over the past 5 years, it's really, it's become less and less prominent for a number of reasons, because the police are doing it much less and less. They're under consent, they're under court order, and the stop, question, and frisk went from $650,000 a year all the way down to like whatever it is, dozens, not dozens, but in the tens of thousands a year. So students are will share. They love to share their experiences and their stories. No question about it. And many of them ask for my own, the benefit of having been a police officer is I'm able to convey a lot of this material using anecdotal experiences, anecdotes and experience. And I'm very honest with them. From the very beginning of class, I tell them, I will never lie to you about anything related to policing or criminal justice. I'll lie to you about other things, like if you ask me if I'm married, or if you ask me how much money I make or whatever, I'll of course about the policing stuff, because I'm not doing you any favors, and this is one of the reasons why you took me instead of somebody else. So, I'm not here to defend the police department and their policies. I was a police officer. I did what the job required me to do, and sometimes that was for the better, and sometimes it wasn't. And I'm willing to talk about those, and let them critique me and critique the police department, and that's good. That's okay. It's part of the educational process. So
we have another question here. Jason, it says,
yep.
CJ programs have a lot of students with interest in policing careers. How would you say teachers can incorporate experiential learning in ways that might impact future officers' practice?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I kind of glossed over it when I was doing my presentation because of time. And so as we know from research that many students, especially at the community college level, enter policing or enter criminal justice because they're interested in the career. And often that motivation is because of TV and movies, but they're interested in a career. Maybe they've had experience in the criminal justice system or their family has been experienced by it. Sometimes they're just interested in it. I think that you have to, not you, but I think as a professor, what I do is I try and look for opportunities to take them out of the material, take them out of the book, take them, we don't have a book, but the course material, take them out of, whatever that is and make it real for them. So what I'll do is in the summertime, I have them participate in National Night Out Against Crime. I have them, sometimes I try and bring in a guest speaker. I have career events. I talk about the auxiliary program. I have a lot of students who come to me and say things about, I'm interested in becoming a police officer. I'm interested in, I heard that there's a cadet program. I try and point them in that direction. I also suggest, hey, what about a ride along? Have you ever thought about a ride along? Police departments do ride alongs. You just have to apply. And I don't know if they're doing them now under COVID, but, all those. So I think that there are opportunities. You have to look for them. I happen to know them because I worked in the field, but and I also, we benefit from the fact that NYPD is so huge. It's the largest police department in the United States, and they have so many resources. So if you're in a place where maybe there's not as many resources or law enforcement is smaller, I would look to see what is the sheriff's department doing? Do they have any kind of inside program? Do they do ride-alongs? Will they come in for guest speaker? Do they have internship availability? So, or maybe just, can you have somebody come and talk to my class about what the sheriffs do and, what that's like? Or, I think you have to sort of go out there and see what's available.
Yes, good.
Yeah, Ken, please.
May I chime in a little bit? Let me say, first of all, for the benefit of people who are watching, and I'll be up front. I had to go look these up because it's been 5 or 6 years ago that Jessica and I wrote up the criteria for this award. But first of all, we wanted something that was either a new, completely novel strategy or a novel approach to traditional teaching methods. We wanted something that could be measured. We wanted something that could be replicated. And basically that was about it. And there might have been some other verbiage in there, but I want to say, first of all, Jason, you touched all the right buttons, and I can see why the committee awarded you the Ken Peek Innovative Teaching Award for this year. It's a wonderful program. And I want to just say that obviously you devoted a lot of time and effort into conceptualizing this program and implementing it, and then finally measuring it. And you do some qualitative analysis and content analysis at the end, looking to see if it worked. Did it work or not? Every book I've ever done, everything I've ever written, I guess because of my own police background and other things, I subscribe to I've heard of Bloom's taxonomy. I've mentioned him, but my idol, so to speak, was John Dewey. And you used this phrase a while ago. He said, the great John Dewey, people learn best by doing. And that is, and you can ask Jessica, that has infiltrated everything I've ever written for SAGE and elsewhere. And in my own policing classes, which I taught for many, many years, we would have guest speakers, we'd have YouTubes, we'd have oral interviews using students in the classroom. Anything we could do. I will say what you've done, of course, is above and beyond and much more involved. But and I think something else that people need to realize who are watching today is, and you use this phrase several times, perception is reality. And yes, I've been blessed to do a number of community policing and problem solving books with an internationally known co-author, Dr. Ron Glenzer. But the whole theme is trying to get police to understand what the community know and can give to the police, what kind of knowledge, what's going on in the neighborhood kind of thing. This very effectively, what you've done is turn the tables. you're taking the community and letting them, teaching them, and I like your term, they're kind of self-learning along the way, how to do it, but they're learning what the police know. And so it brings together a really nice symbiosis. And it basically turns the tables on what we've been doing with all of our community policing books over the years. And I think, again, that's wonderful. I guess one of the questions I would ask, and I think others might be interested too, is at least here in Nevada, University of Reno, Nevada, Reno, where I am affiliated, if we had a field trip or anything, you just simply couldn't require it because of the liability thing, and you mentioned this was for extra credit.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I think other people, any opportunity for a lawsuit, some people will take advantage of. Did you touch base with your legal advisors or campus or university system people? I'm sure you had them sign a waiver, or would you explain how you covered your bases in terms of liability? Somebody, God forbid, gets hurt out of one of these meetings on the way there. That's why we field trips. Everything had to be voluntary here because of the specter of liability, automobile crash, going there, coming back, getting hurt in a prison tour. Could you speak to that for the benefit of your audience today?
Yeah. Well, thank you for your kind words. But what I'll say is about this. No, you can't. I couldn't make this as part of a requirement, right? I couldn't make it part of a requirement. However, many of our courses now have a service learning requirement, and that's sort of a trend I think that's happening throughout the United States in higher education, where students are required as part of the course to go out in the field and work with an agency. With those, the students, I think there are certain liability issues. They have to be vetted and they have to be approved by the mayor's office. This, I did not do that. I didn't do it. Something I did consider, especially after 15 years in the police department and everything is CYA, right? That's all you hear, CYA. I thought about it, but I also I didn't necessarily reach out. I didn't reach out to any kind of general counsel in the college. My reasoning was such that we're a commuter school. Students are coming and going anyway. They don't live on campus. This isn't really a campus-sponsored event. It's not really. It's something that I'm just asking them to go to completely of their own volition and voluntarily. So, but that's something I certainly would consider moving forward if I have them. If I continue to do it, especially now under COVID conditions. So I think it's a great suggestion. But
it's something to think about in your home area, okay, well, enough said about that, I guess then. But I just want to say again, it's I think a very wonderful program, and people learn best by doing, and you've done that very well. So would appreciate hearing from other people.
Jessica, if we have time, did you want to have people go into rooms, or are we beyond that at this point?
We are beyond our time limit. If people would like to stay and join breakout rooms, we can do that as an optional sort of component. I know we did just put this on the calendar for an hour, so people might have other meetings or obligations that they have to get to. But I can open those breakout rooms.
Yeah.
For who are able to stay. My only concern is we might end up with some people like in small breakout groups if people have left already. Okay. Try to monitor that. But it seems like we've got quite a few people jumping off and having to go anyways. So
okay,
wouldn't even put people in breakout rooms at this point. We'd end up with people one or two. But if there are those who would like to ask some questions or come off of mute and share some feedback, I think we're at a small enough group now where that would be completely manageable. So if there's anybody who's still on the call who would like to do so, feel free to come off mute, turn on your camera, and ask a question if you have one.
One thing I'll just point out about this is that it's still happening. They're still doing them. They're just on Zoom now. So they are still having these community council meetings, and students can still attend, so they can do it from their home. And in addition to that, because policing here in New York City has, they've taken on this very they've gone community policing model full sail with this neighborhood policing program. They have now they have neighborhoods. Just it's even more granular than the community council, which is the precinct level. Now it's like neighborhood within the precinct level. So there are police officers themselves who are responsible for maybe a certain sector or a few blocks, and those police officers are holding meetings with members of the community online, and so it's more opportunity to sort of get at issues that are even like on a lower level, so to speak, more ground level instead of wider community level.
In the comments, Andrea suggested trying something with court watching as well, and said that's something that she does in her courses.
That's great. I took my 101 class. We have a great, we have an abundance of riches at BMCC because of where we are, and we are right up the block from the federal courthouse, New York City courthouse, New York State Supreme. We have all the courthouses within a short walk, from us, and so. We have a great contact who works with us regularly. He's a senior court clerk at the New York State Supreme Court. And, whenever I teach criminal justice 101, I hook up with him and he brings us on a tour. We sit in on, like serious crime. That's where felony trials happen. We sit in on, serious crimes, serious, he brings us through. He'll have a judge come in and talk to the students. It's really great. And so if you have the opportunity to get out and to have students go into that type of environment too, it's great. He had them sitting in the judge's chair in the jury box, and one was a stenographer, so it was a really cool experience for them. And me too. I liked it also. Ken, did you have another question?
No, I'm finished. Thank you very much. I need to jump off here too, but again, a job well done, and thanks, Jessica, for facilitating all of this today.
Of course, it's great to see you again. Jason, we did get one other question in the chat. Or if you have a link to one of the Zoom meetings or the NYPD police community meetings.
Sure. Well, what I could do is I can just email you. So it depends on which precinct you're going to go to. So if are you in the city? Are you? Okay. So New York City has 77 precincts, so there's going to be a variety of different meetings. But what I could do is I can send you a link to one of those, and you can sort of take it, not the link itself, but the website where you can find that.